It's gotta be one of the biggest, most persistent arguments in all of sports. Is it football or is it soccer? The whole thing seems like a paradox. You've got Americans calling a game played mostly with your hands, football, while pretty much the rest of the planet uses that name for a game you play with your feet. But what if I told you there's a perfectly logical, fascinating reason for all of it? Okay, let's finally put this thing to bed. So let's start with the big paradox here. You have American football. It's an amazing game of strategy, power, and skill. But let's be honest, the main thing you're doing is throwing, catching, and running with the ball in your hands. So why on earth is the word foot even in the name? It just doesn't seem to make sense. And then you flip it. You've got the most popular sport on the entire planet, a game literally defined by what you do with your feet. But in a few key countries, like the US, they call it soccer. It feels completely backwards, right? Well, to untangle all of this, we've got to go way, way back in time. All right, here's the first big clue, and honestly, it's a total game changer. The word football doesn't mean what we all think it means. Its origin story has absolutely nothing to do with kicking a ball. We all just naturally assume football means a foot making contact with a ball. It seems obvious. But historically, nope, that's completely wrong. The name had nothing to do with the ball at all. It was all about describing the people who were playing. See, back in medieval times, the sport you played pretty much broadcast your social status. The rich aristocrats, they played their games up on horseback. Think jousting, polo, fancy stuff. The regular folks, the peasantry, well, they played their games on the ground, on foot. So football was just this blanket term for a whole bunch of chaotic, messy ball games played by the commoners. It didn't matter if you were kicking, handling, or tackling. If you were on foot, you were playing some version of football. So for centuries, football was just this generic idea. But then the 19th century rolled around, and everything started to change in the fancy public schools of Britain. This is the moment where that one big, messy family of football starts to split into the very distinct sports that we recognize today. The thing is, every school had its own flavor, its own rules, often because of where they played. Most of them were kicking-focused games. But then you had rugby school. And legend has it that in 1823, this kid named William Webb Ellis just decided to heck with the rules, scooped up the ball, and started running with it. And just like that, the handling game was born. Now, you can imagine the problem, right? All these students from different schools would go to university, and they couldn't play against each other because the rules were a total mess. So, in 1863, a bunch of clubs met up in a London pub to form the Football Association, the FA, to finally create one single official set of rules. And this meeting changed sports forever. And man, the debate got heated. The two biggest arguments were about running with the ball in your hands and something called hacking, which was literally just kicking your opponent in the shins. The guy from the Blackheath Club, which played a rugby-style game, was absolutely furious, arguing that if they banned that stuff, they'd take all the courage and pluck out of the sport. In the end, the kicking and no hacking side won the vote. So what happened? Blackheath and the other clubs that liked the rough and tumble game, they just walked out. And that, right there, was the Great Schism. From that day on, you had two official types of football: the kicking game, called association football, and the handling game, called rugby football. Okay, so how does all this British school drama get us to the American game? Well, when these sports crossed the Atlantic, American universities had to pick a side. They had to choose a branch of that football family tree to play, and their choice would basically lock in the names for good. Harvard had been playing their own unique version, but in 1874, they played a game against McGill University from Montreal, who played by rugby rules. And the Harvard players, they absolutely loved it. The running, the tackling, the oval ball, it was a hit. They adopted the rugby code, and pretty soon, all the other big schools followed their lead. But wait, here's the million-dollar question. They chose the handling game, rugby football. So why in the world did they still call it just football? The answer has nothing to do with how they move the ball down the field. It has everything to do with how they scored points. Just take a look at these old scoring rules from the early days. This is wild. From 1883 all the way through the 1890s, a kicked field goal was worth more, sometimes way more, than a touchdown. For decades, the entire point of the game was just to get the ball close enough so you could set up for a kick. And just like that, the paradox is solved. Back when the name football was being cemented in America, the game was dominated by the foot. The hands were just a way to get the ball into position for the foot, which was the most valuable weapon you had. The name made perfect sense. Okay, so that's one mystery down. But what about the word soccer? So many people are convinced it's this clumsy word that Americans came up with. But the truth, well, the truth is it's about as British as a cup of tea. The name actually comes from a bit of university slang. See, back in the 1880s, it was really trendy at Oxford to shorten words and tack an "air" suffix on the end. So rugby football got nicknamed rugger, and for association football, they took the "a-sock" part, added the "air." A soccer was a little clunky, so it quickly got smoothed down to just soccer. So let's be super clear here. Soccer is not an American invention. It was a nickname created by British university students to easily tell the difference between their two footballs, rugger and soccer. And for the better part of 100 years, the words football and soccer were used pretty much interchangeably in Britain. Okay, so the final piece of this whole puzzle is understanding that what happened in America isn't some weird isolated thing. It's actually part of a very clear and consistent pattern that you can see all over the world. Just look at this. The pattern is so obvious once you see it. In countries where another type of football got really popular first, like American football, Canadian football, Australian rules, or Gaelic football in Ireland, they all needed a simple way to talk about association football without getting everyone confused. So what did they use? That old British nickname, soccer. It's really an elegant, simple rule. If your country already has a very popular game that you call football, you naturally use the nickname soccer for the other one, just to keep things clear. The US, Canada, Australia, they aren't the exceptions. They're actually perfect examples of the rule. So in the end, this whole big debate is really based on a giant misunderstanding of history. Football is the ancient family name for all of those games played on foot. American football and association football are just two brothers who grew up and went their separate ways. And soccer, well, that was just the nickname the family gave one of them to tell the two apart. So the real question isn't which name is right, but which branch of the incredible family tree are you watching?